So I'll be now talking about the work what we have done at Mula Mutha Catchment. I'll be talking about what is natural capital accounting and valuation ecosystem service, why we need to do that, what is the protocol we follow,
Yeah.
develop green GDP and sustain natural resources. And then we can also curtail fraudulent practices in the development of project. What I see throughout the country, people are just mismanaging the ecosystem so that they can make the money. Then I'll be talking about mitigate changes in the climate and sustain people's livelihood. Then I am going to the Mula Mutha catchment, talk about ecosystem services. At the end, I'll be talking about some society relevant science what we have done over the last 2.5 or 3 decades in the Western Ghats and in Bangalore and other places. Okay, so the protocol what we have followed is the SIA protocol, that is the experimental ecosystem accounting developed at the United Nations. There were 179 country representatives were there. I also took part in the discussion and deliberation. The invitation to me came from the United Nations sometime in 2019. Just before that, I had published two articles, one on ecosystem services of wetland and second on one of the district, Uttar Kannada district, where we have worked almost 2.5 decades. So those the publications were available online, and the United Nations approached me asking whether I can do this using the protocol developed at United Nations for 10 districts in the country or 10 districts in Karnataka. I opted for Karnataka. But only the thing happened was when I took up this responsibility, when I signed the MOU, then there was a COVID 2020. But fortunately, the COVID helped me. Myself and my team were not traveling much. I was not attending many committee meetings or anything. So because of that, instead of 10 districts, we covered all the districts in Karnataka, 31 districts. And today we know the what is the worth of the forest ecosystem, agriculture ecosystem, and the the wetlands. So now when we look at the ecosystem accounting, there are four parts. First is we have to know what is the extent of the ecosystem. For example, if you have the forest, what is the spatial extent of the forest? What is the spatial extent of the wetland, etc. The second is the ecosystem condition, because the spatial extent and condition would decide the ecosystem services. It depends on us. How healthy we are, our the responsibilities or our job would be dependent on our health. So similarly, the ecosystem. So then we have the third part is the goods and services. What are the tangible and the non-tangible services provided by an ecosystem? Then finally, we have the ecosystem monetary asset. So when you look at the environment, you have the ecosystem extent and the condition, and that's the benefit that the society is dependent on, and we are just trying to account that how much the society is benefited because of this ecosystem. Unfortunately, people have not understood the worth of the forest. They think that forest is the land with some trees, but they have not understood what are the services provided by the forest or any ecosystem. Okay, so now why we have taken up this responsibility? See, we have a economic metric called GDP or the gross domestic product. Unfortunately, it is the erroneous the metric because it does not take into account the degradation cost of the ecosystem. For example, when somebody sets up an industry, hundreds of acres of land is being diverted for the industry. This one. But what is the damage that has happened to the ecosystem in that land? We do not account when we talk about GDP. Only the output from the industry is accounted in the GDP. Now, if you want to see the ecosystem extent, we are fortunate because we launched the satellites way back in 70s. Every 21 or 30 days interval, we get this spatial data. When you have that huge spatial data, you should be able to assess the ecosystem extent and condition. That the data of 5 decades, which is available in public domain, we have used for assessing the ecosystem extent, and we also did the ecosystem condition. For example, forest ecosystem, condition shows how the forest is getting degraded. Intact forest is shown here. Then if you look at this is a perforation and the fragmentation. That means we have done the fragmentation analysis. Fragmentation of the forest is contributing to the human wildlife conflict. That is where you need to address the problem of fragmentation. For example, if there are wild animals moving in the region, for them its entire region is a territory. They start moving from this one region, one part of the territory to the next part of the territory. So at that time, if somebody has converted a forest into agricultural land, as they pass through this agricultural land, naturally they tend to they raid the crop, they eat the crop, as we all do when we go out, we take food. Similarly, animals also do it. And when the farmer senses the loss, he starts shooting or hunting the animal. When he starts shooting or hunting the animal, then the animals start residing in a smaller pocket. Then they start breeding among themselves. That is in the meta population. That is called inbreeding. The inbreeding will lead to the extinction of the species. That is where, if you are talking about conservation of diversity of plants and animals, we need to the minimize or the eradicate the fragmentation of the forest. Without any mercy, we should remove all the encroaches who have encroached the forest ecosystem. Okay, so now how do we do the ecosystem condition assessment? Fortunately, we have the fragmentation metric. We compute, suppose if you have the image, you can choose a 3 by 3 kernel. In that kernel, what is the proportion of the pixel under forest and non-water pixel? When you take that ratio, it is called PF. Then similarly, you can take compute PFF, which is the ratio of proportion of number of forest pixel pair and total number of adjacent pairs of at least one forest pixel. When you do that in a cardinal direction, when you do that, so you will be computing PF and PFF. Once you have PF and PFF, you can find out the condition of the ecosystem. For example, if PF is 1, it means all the pixels are forest. That means that the pixel falls in the intact forest or the interior forest. Like this, various levels of degradation you can assess. That is very crucial if you want to talk about restoring the ecosystem, etc. Now, this is the picture my team took it when we were staying at IISr. As we entered the IISr guest house, my student noticed the artist has done a wonderful job how the water and the soil nutrient transfer happens in the system, how the biological organisms including humans are dependent on the various services provided by an ecosystem. So then, see, when you look at the ecosystem, we get the services are broadly grouped as a three. The one is provisioning services, second is regulating services, third is the cultural services. Provisioning services are the tangible, the goods what we get from the forest. It could be timber, fuel wood, the food, non-timber forest produce, and the water, etc. Then regulating services are the services provided by ecosystem to maintain the ecosystem, like carbon sequestration, then the purification of air, purification of the water, climate regulation, flood mitigation, etc. Then cultural services are the recreation, the aesthetic service, the spirituality and education. People like me who conduct a research, naturally we spend some money. That is the service provided by an ecosystem that we use it for accounting the cultural services. So now, as I said earlier, current economic metric, the GDP, does not account for the contribution from the nature or the degradation cost of ecosystem the while implementing the developmental project. That's where we are insisting that we need to have a green GDP in a system so that we can have a strong and resilient nation. So now, when you talk about green GDP and sustainable growth, when you have the green GDP, which will take into the account, that it is when we talk about sustainability, it's an integration of the environment, social, and the economic. So when you maintain the sustainability in the system, which also the maintain protects the environment and also helps in raw material conservation, increasing competitiveness, and stimulates the innovation and the associated this one. When you look at some of the people in the rural area, they have been practicing the sustainable the principles when they are doing the harvesting of the natural resources.
Right.
For example, For example, this person is must be about 65 plus. You know, when I saw her, she and her daughter-in-law collects the bivalves in the estuary in Uttar Kannada district. When I watched her carefully for a week, I noticed that every day she was collecting only one basket full of bivalves. And one day, after 4 days, I talked to her. I asked her why she collects only one basket, even though there is a time, and two ladies are doing the harvesting. She told me that when she sells the bivalves in the market, what she collected in one basket, she earns 350 rupees, which is sufficient for her to run her family. She said for the tomorrow, that is the next day, she will come back and collect it again. That means she is ensuring the renewability in the system without over harvesting. That is the sustainability. It is not that urban elites, we all what we do is we think of keeping the money for our unborn great grandchildren also, and that's when we are taking a toll on the nature. So now, as I said earlier, we did a work for Karnataka, and we submitted a report to the United Nations. Of course, I gave a talk in the United Nations as a country representative also, and the delegates from the Europe were surprised with the progress what we have done in India. For one federal state, which is about 1,90,000 square kilometer, we have done the valuation. Whereas all the other countries were taking up a small region and doing the thing. After my presentation, one of the lady delegate asked me, "How did you people do it?" I mentioned that that is the power of the youth in my country. Only thing is we have to empower them with the knowledge. They'll come out with this kind of wonderful this one. That's how we have been successful in showcasing the youth of India in the United Nations also. And after that presentation and the submission of the report, Springer came forward asking us whether we can submit the manuscript for publishing as a book. Now today we have this book available online. You can also published by the Springer. Of course, it's one of the popular work that we have done so far. Okay. Now let us try to understand why we need to do the valuation of the ecosystem. The resources are becoming scanty. So because of the changes in climate, one is to understand whether changes in climate is happening. Let us look at the data. You see the temperature is increasing. That means the planet is becoming warmer. As the temperature is changing, naturally there are associated problems also. Now, when you look at the emission data, emission of the greenhouse gas or the carbon dioxide is correlated with the temperature increase. That means our activities of burning the fossil fuels and our other activities like deforestation is contributing to the increase in the greenhouse gas footprint on the earth, which is responsible for warming of the earth. Okay. So now, what are the consequences of warming of the earth? The last decade, if you see, the number of disasters have increased. Even our country, we face the landslides, mudslides with high intensity rainfall in Karnataka, Kerala, and even Uttarakhand, the Himachal Pradesh with the cloudburst, etc. Then the other thing is the sea level is rising. You won't be surprised if I say that you won't see the Mumbai, Bangalore, Karwar in another 15 or 20 years. So if we don't wake up today, you will see the Mumbai. Probably you can plan for a city underwater. So now we also are losing the food. Now, for example, coral bleaching with 1.5 degrees Celsius increase in temperature, we lose 70%. With another zero point 0.5 degrees Celsius, it shoots up to 99%. Similarly, if you look at the other species like plant, the insects and vertebrate, we will lose 6 insects. When I talk about this insect, they are the endemic species. They do the ecological services. I'm not talking about mosquitoes or this one. I'm talking about pollinators like honeybees, etc. You see that with increase in another zero point 0.5, we will lose 18 insects, 16 plants, and 8 vertebrates. And the drought, if you look at the 350 million people get affected with 1.5, another zero point 0.5, it's about 410 million people get affected. Or the sea level rise, the 48 centimeter will go up to the 56 centimeter and about 50 million people get affected. That means we may have to I mean, the Mumbai, Chennai, the Mangalore, Karwar people need to worry about their the prospects of living on the earth. The implications of the changes in climate. To summarize, you will have the frequent floods and droughts. In the same year, like Karnataka faced the flood, and following that, we had a green drought and decline in crop productivity. So that means the food security will be threatened, the water availability will be threatened, and cities would become vulnerable, coastal lines become vulnerable, and the public health. With increase in temperature, there will be more and more disease vectors. That's where you will see when there is an increase in temperature, chikungunya, dengue, then COVID, and such the zoonotic diseases you would notice, and that instances will increase by many fold. So now, if you want to have a resilient system, you need to do the conservation of biodiversity. For example, in a district where I work, in one taluk we documented 54 varieties of rice. If you look at those varieties, one is good in eat, other one is good in the fragrance. If you just hybridize those things, those traits, you have a better product. Even if you take brinjal, you see the varieties of brinjal. In one village, we found 16 varieties. If we hybridize it, the youngsters can do the science, the innovation, and they can come up with a better product than going as a slaves for the multinational product or the genetically modified product like BT brinjal or BT cotton, etc. It's unfortunate the decision makers of today have not understood the worth of our natural resources. To tell them what is the worth of natural resources, we need to document this, and we need to tell them about the services provided by this in terms of the health, etc. Then only I hope they will understand, but I am not sure about it. So now, if you want to see the on Earth, how many species of plants and animals are there? As per Rig Veda, as per scripture, 8 to 12 million species. I am surprised Rig Veda even talks about microorganisms. Okay, in science, we have estimated about 1.3 million species. And out of 1.3 million, we know the biochemical composition of 15% of that. Even before assessing the remaining 85%, we are doing the degradation and the great injustice we are doing to the system. You know, I work extensively in the Western Ghat from Kerala to the Gujarat. We have been doing the ecosystem services. Earlier, our team worked on biodiversity, hydrology, etc. So now, if you want to know which part of the earth has the highest number of plants and animals, when you do the mapping of the number of species across the latitudinal gradient, you will see at 8 to 14 degree or 8 to 15 degree the latitude, you have the highest number of plants and animal varieties. This corresponds to Kerala, Karnataka, and Tamil Nadu, part of the Western Ghats. Okay. So now that means some of us have inherited such a rich diversity of the plants and animals, and it's our responsibility to pass it on to our next generation. You might ask, what is the use of these varieties of plants and animals? When we have a variety of plants and animals on the earth, you have variety of food. Because of variety of food, our body gets the medicinal property, and with that, you have the immunity in the place. Okay. Now, to understand what the extent of the ecosystem, we have used the temporal remote sensing data. As I mentioned, we used the remote sensing data from 80s and to the 2018. And we also did the fragmentation analysis. This gives the spatial extent of the ecosystem. This gives the condition of the ecosystem. Earlier to analyze one district during my doctoral work, I used to take about 6 to 8 months. Now, today, because of the machine learning algorithms, my students are empowered with this technique, so they do the entire classification of the Western Ghats in 6 or 8 months. That is what one of my students did it. So, which shows there is a degradation of the forest as we move from one decade to the next decade. And not only this one, we also projected what is the likely scenario in 2031. So now when we see that entire Western Ghat, they will have only 18% under forest as per this the prediction. But as per the norm, we are supposed to have 33% green cover of native species. But what we notice is will be 18%, and evergreen forest will be only about 10% of the total. Now, what are the implications of that? If you look at Kerala will become warmer and warmer. and there would be rainfall change. Kerala receives the large amount of rainfall for a longer duration. That pattern will change, and the rain, instead of coming in the which spread across the few months for 4 to 6 months, will start happening in a few weeks, and you will have a high intensity rainfall. When there's a high intensity rainfall, so because of the degradation of the landscape with the removal of vegetation cover and loss of the binding properties of the soil because of the absence of the root, you will have more and landslides and mudslides happening in the region. This is what we had, we published this article way back in 2018. We had written a paragraph about the likely implication, the changes in temperature, etc. At that time, in a paragraph, I had highlighted the imminent, landslides, mudslides in parts of Karnataka and also in Kerala. Then immediately in 2019, that landslides happened in Karnataka and in parts of Kerala. Then immediately this publication people started referring. But unfortunately, decision makers didn't take it seriously, and they allowed the degradation to continue to happen. And the consequence of that, what we noticed in the last year at Wayanad, an entire village was wiped out. 150 families belonging to one community wiped out. This community, who are experts in cutting the trees, they were hired by the plantation owners who are sitting happily in places like Mumbai or Bangalore or Hyderabad. They hired the workers for cutting the trees, and after cutting the tree, those region was converted into the tea plantation, and these workers were given a job in the tea plantation. But when unfortunate high intensity rainfall happened last year, that entire population was wiped out. That is where the mismanagement of the ecosystem by the influential section of the society without understanding the implication, the vulnerable section of the society is getting affected. That is where the valuation might help in bringing down these anomalies in the system. So then we also looked at the services provided by an ecosystem in terms of the carbon. So this is the above ground, the biomass, and the below ground biomass and the soil carbon. As we all know, when we the during photosynthesis, during the plants sequester the carbon from the atmosphere and gives us oxygen, and that carbon is stored in the plant pot. We have accounted that in the above ground and below ground biomass. So earlier people used to cut the tree to find out the biomass weight of the tree, and then 50% they used to assume it as a carbon. Now today, because of the allometric equation, we don't have to cut the tree. Using the allometric equation, the people have derived the relationship between the girth and height of a tree with the biomass, and we use that technique with the species wise and vegetation type wise. We have a set of allometric equation which was used to quantify the carbon. That is what we have done. When we did that carbon estimation, it shows that 1.23 million gigagram of carbon is there in our forests, the soil and vegetation in Western Ghats. And every year, about 37,000 gigagram of carbon gets sequestered in the system, which is equivalent to the carbon that is emitted by the towns or cities in that region, like Mangalore, the Cochin, Trivandrum, etc. If you look at the economic worth of the carbon, taking into account the social cost of the carbon, it amounts to about 100 billion rupees or $1.4 billion. You might ask, what is the use of this kind of analysis? When I represent a country in the international delegation, I put forward the argument. For example, when I go to the Europe or the Western countries, we tell them that the carbon that is stored in the forest or the carbon emitted by them during industrialization, because the only earth, that the whatever the carbon that is getting into atmosphere was the sequestered by the forests in Himalayas and in the Western Ghats, etc. Now, for the service that is provided by the forest in our country, for example, in Western Ghats, they need to pay 100 billion rupees. That is the service charge. When we get that money, we can do the conservation also. This is one way of looking at the valuation, the benefits of the valuation. Now, let us look at the linkage between the water and the forest. The hydrological services provided by the forest, as you said earlier, you are involved in the catchment. we need to understand that rivers are living entities. They have the catchment. We need to maintain the catchment. Then only we can have the water, or you can have healthy ecosystem. Now, to highlight further, you can see the photograph. This is of 1991, and this is the latest photograph. In the same monsoon season, you see, in one time I had water. Now today I don't have water. So now that could be because of the removal of the vegetation in the catchment. Now to the highlight that, or to assess that statement, we carried out the study. For a 36 months, the choosing the various catchment. The catchment dominated by native species forest. The next one, monoculture plantation like rubber, acacia, eucalyptus. The third one is agriculture, the crops. The fourth one is urban areas. The fifth one is degraded landscape. Like that, 32 locations we put the sensors to understand how much water get infiltrated when it rains. So, when there is a catchment dominated by native species forests, which are diverse, the roots are also diverse. When the roots are diverse, the soil microorganisms are abundant and diverse. When soil microorganism is abundant and diverse, it makes the soil porous or permeable due to microbial activity. When the soil becomes porous or permeable, it allows the water to percolate. It fills this zone, which is, we call it as a groundwater zone. Then it fills this zone, which is a vadose zone. Now, during the monsoon of 4 months, about 60 to 70% of the rainfall get infiltrated and gets stored in the underlying layer. Then once the monsoon recedes, the water that is stored in this region start moving towards the water body for the next 4 months. We have the rainfall for 4 months. The next 4 months, the water stored in the wider zone comes to the water body, and during the summer, the water that is stored here comes to the water body, which we call it as a base flow. Now, because of that, you have 12 months of water in the water body. We have graded the water bodies as A, B, C, D. A are the one which carry the water for 12 months, B for 8 months, and C are the 6 months, and D are the for the 4 months. When you look at this region, the region dominated by the forest, we see that about the blue bar shows the quantum of the infiltration, which is about 60 to 68% of the rainfall get infiltrated. Where in the region where we have removed the forest in the name of development, you see only 20 to 28% of the rainfall get infiltrated in the region. Now, when you look at the demand in the society, we have done the estimation of the water required for the growing crops, then the horticulture, the livestock rearing, fish, etc. And you see where our forests are there, demand for water is higher, but there is a sufficient resource. The green bar is much higher than the red bar, which shows that resource is higher than the demand. In the name of development, where people have degraded the catchment, you see there's a demand for water is there, but there's a scarcity of water, which leads to the conflict. Now, to the summarize what I said so far, this is the region where you see the 12 months of water is available. Green are the 8 months, and yellow is the 6 months, and this is 4 months. When you overlay the vegetation cover, you see that wherever native species vegetation is there, you have 12 months water. Wherever forests are fragmented, depending on the intrusion of the monoculture species, you have 8 to 6 months of water available in the water body. Where we have degraded the catchment with the forest cover less than 30%, we have the water available only for the 4 months. Now, when you want to see how this is linked to the livelihood of the farmers or the people in the region, you see where the 12 months water is available, farmer grows the cash crop or a multiple crop. The earning is about on 1,54,000 rupees per acre per year. Whereas in this region, since the water is available for 4 to 6 months, they grow only one crop, and the earning is 32,000 rupees per acre per year. You see the difference between 32,000 versus 1,54,000. See, in spite of the forest, there is a development happened, and every farmer is happy in the region because of the water available. Not only the thing, we look at the yield of the crop. In this region, yield of the crop is almost twice the yield of the crop in this region. For example, paddy, the yield is as high as 14 to 18 quintal per acre, whereas in this region it is 6 to 8 quintal per acre. Now the government of India want to increase the income of the farmers. My only suggestion is just do the catchment treatment. Restore the degraded catchment with the native species. Then people will have water. people will have pollinator. With that, they will have a yield of the crop and a multi-season crop. They will be much happier than your 10,000 rupees what you give once a year, which is not comparable compared to the earning of 1,54,000 rupee per acre versus 32,000 rupee per acre with the degraded landscape. We published this work in the current science in 2020. Earlier people used to think if the forests are there, that because of evapotranspiration, we lose the water. We have disproved that theory. That's why this article received a highest citation also. So now the understanding the linkage between the water and the forest, our elders have conserved the patch of forest that is called Devarakadu or sacred groves or Khan or rice in various part of the Western Ghats. Unfortunately, that forest is getting degraded today with the idle people. They are converting the forest into the cement land. When you look at Lord Shiva's head, that has a hair. As long as the hair is there on the Lord Shiva's head, he retains the Ganga and we have the water on the earth. Now, to summarize what I said so far, when Mother Earth is covered with a green saree of native species, she retains the water for 12 months for the prosperity of every inhabitant in that catchment. When we convert that landscape into the synthetic saree of rubber or acacia or eucalyptus or gliricidia, she retains the water for 6 to 8 months. That means the people in that region will lose the water for 4 to 6 months. When we degrade the catchment with the forest cover less than 30%, she has the water only during the monsoon. The remaining 8 months, people fight for the water. So now, with this background, let us move to the Mula Mutha Catchment. This is where that proposed the so far called beautification is happening. So that river rejuvenation project. This is the money that is being spent on the project. Now let us look at what is the worth of the ecosystem and how we did the ecosystem. I will not get into the statistical details of this thing. If you look at this is about the 2000 square kilometer catchment. Okay. So instead of, initially the suggestion came to me was to look at this and give the services provided by this portion. It's very difficult to assess the services of, for example, if I take your body, I cannot say only what is the service provided by your hand or a leg. I need to assess the entire body. That's where the catchment has to be assessed to find out what is the worth of the catchment. Then compute the per hectare value. Then you can adapt those value to quantify what is the worth of this region and how much ecosystem we are losing with that. Okay. So now as I said earlier, we did a quantification of provisioning services. Under that, we have quantified water, non-timber forest produce, fuel wood, the fodder fish. See, in this, we got the quantities either from the forest department or from the government agencies like the irrigation department, etc. And then we know the market value. So we deducted the market value with the cost of the labor and transportation. In the forest department record, you have something called senior age value, which is the value after the deducting the cost from the market price. Whatever the benefit the forest department gets it is called senior age value. That is the value we have used to quantify the forest goods, non-timber forest produce, timber, etc. Then of course the fuel wood, we did the quantification based on our survey to find out how many people used this one, the estimate what we did, and also what is the cost of the fuel wood and what is the labor cost and associated cost. Then coming to the regulating services, we have looked at the carbon stock. Earlier what has used to happen with the regulating services is people used to do the quantification services using the values from other countries. But this small work of Mula Mutha Catchment made us to do this calculation using the primary data. So now we have the regulating services for the first time for one catchment, in the country. So that I'm sure the people will start looking at and they will improve that further. Under regulating services, we have done the carbon sequestration, the soil conservation, groundwater recharge, nutrient cycling, pollination service, air filtration services, and habitat protection. As I said earlier, the carbon stock and carbon sequestration, we did the assessment based on the above ground biomass, below ground biomass, and considering the extent of the forest. There are models are there called Invest. You can use Invest to do the quantification of the carbon, etc. Similarly, the soil conservation, once you know the nutrient of this the forest soil, with the conservation, what is the worth of that. Similarly, groundwater recharge. There are groundwater wells are there. When you take the difference in the water table during the monsoon and post monsoon and the summer, it will give you a picture about how much water is the recharge in the system because of the forest. Then also we have looked at the nutrient cycling in terms of NPK. When you have the soil, the soil conservation helps you in nutrient retention and also cycling of the nutrient. So that if you have to put the NPK into the agriculture field, what is the money you spend and what is the nutrient soil and how much services it provides, we have quantified. Then we have looked at the pollination service closer to the forest and within the forest, what is the agriculture yield or the vegetable yield we have done, and away from the forest, what is the yield? The difference in the yield, you can attribute it to the pollination service. Okay. Then air filtration services. Today, there are the various sensors deployed across the country to do the flux assessment, which gives you the particulate matter, the carbon, and also the gaseous this one like sulfur dioxide, etc. We tried to get the detail for the entire country. Then we pulled out the data for Mula Mutha Catchment, closer to Mula Mutha Catchment, and that gives you an idea. Suppose if you want to get a clean air, you need to use the devices like the various air pollution control equipment like electrostatic precipitator, etc. Then if you are getting that the same the quality of air in the forest, then that is naturally the service provided by the forest. You can compute it considering the comparable values from the comparable devices. Then also the habitat protection is the other one. That you would say the forest versus there are national park sanctuary or the zoos. How much money spent on that? Now in the natural forest without any this one, that is being protected. So now that is the service you can value that you can account. So that's what we have accounted to the manage the 100 hectares of the national park or a sanctuary. How much money the government allocates and spends per year? That value we have used for habitat protection value of the forest. Then the cultural services, we have looked at the ecotourism and environmental education and research. The students who go on the environmental tour, etc., and the ecotourism, by travel cost method, one can do the services that revenue from the ecotourism, etc. Then combining this provisioning, regulating, and cultural services will give you the total ecosystem supply value or the gross ecological product. This is also known as green GDP. So now the TESV is the aggregation of the three services what I talked about: provisioning, regulating, cultural services. Now once you know the TESV per year, this is the services what we have accounted is per year. Suppose if you keep 1,000 rupees in a bank at a 10% interest, you will get 100 rupees the interest. To get 100 rupees, you have to keep the principal amount of 1,000 rupees. Now, similarly, if you are getting TSV of X amount per year, then you can compute what is the worth of the forest or the net present value of the forest. That is what we have computed. Considering the life of the forest are 50 years, which is debatable, but that is conventionally being used, and also the discount rate of 3%. You might say there's the discount rate should be the zero, but as the academician, we are all idealists, but we cannot apply that to the decision making. So as per the Supreme Court, for renewable resources, the discount rate is 2%, and for non-renewable resources, discount rate is 4%. That's why we have considered the average of 2 and 4, that is 3%, to do the net present value calculation for the region. Now, see, as I said earlier, we have done the provisioning services using the residual value method. That means we know the market price minus the cost this one that gives the residual value multiplied by the quantity of the goods will give you the worth of that good in the from that ecosystem. Similarly, we have used the regulating services. We have used the invest model to quantify the carbon in the system or the soil. One we have used those models as I explained earlier. Then cultural services, revenue from the ecotourism, then funding for the environmental education, research paper, research project, like we carry out the research in the forest area. We have used that data. This is available in the forest department record. For example, for the habitat protection, there are no details in the forest department records. How much money they use it for the national park or the sanctuary. So what we did is we chose the nearest national park from Karnataka, closer to the Maharashtra, for using the valuation of the habitat protection. Okay. Now this gives a picture of the work what we did in the June. You can see the botanist Madam Revati with us. She helped us in mapping the diversity of plants in the region, and of course she was also giving us the other insights like the medicinal properties of the plant, etc. And we enjoy the fruit, etc. The Kedar from that foundation is also and Amit were actually accompanied us. This gives a glimpse of the sacred grove which we visited in the region. You can see the girth of the trees in some patches in the Mula Mutha Catchment. That is how we carried out the field work. And thanks to Jivit Nadi Foundation for making this happen in the field. Okay. Now I'm giving the result. This gives the extent of the forest. We did the land use assessment using the remote sensing data of 10 meter spatial resolution. We could, since we had gone to the field and collected training data, we did a supervised classification of the Mula Mutha catchment. It gives the spatial extent of the forest in the region. You know, as I said earlier, the catchment is about 2039 the square kilometer. Now you know what is the spatial extent of the forest in the region. Whether it is the semi-evergreen, moist deciduous, dry deciduous, it ranges from 3 to 11 and 8% respectively. Okay. So now this is the region where that proposed project, again we have considered the sub-catchment of that region to quantify the per hectare value. Okay. Now at sub-basin level for the entire catchment, there are the various basins are there based on the tributary. We have computed the sub-basin wise, the extent of this one, and highlighted one or the catchment which are affected because of this project. Okay. So then, so we also did the quantification of we did the assessment of the condition of the forest using the fragmentation indices, which gives of the total forest area of 463 square kilometer, how much degraded forest and what is the proportion which are intact forest. 172 square kilometer is a kind of intact forest of the 463 square kilometers. Now we know the extent of the forest ecosystem. We know the condition of the ecosystem. With that, we started the ecosystem services. So we had an opportunity to enjoy the fruits in the region. When we had a discussion with these ladies, they gave us the data about how often they go to the forest, what is the quantum of this kind of fruit they collect, and what is their livelihood aspect. We use that data to do the quantification. And of course, we supplemented that data with the data that is available in the forest department record, and there are some studies people have carried out in the study region. NTFP, the forest department also gives the record thing. Then but we have two scenarios which I'm going to show you soon. Okay. Then we did the water, as I said earlier. We have done the catchment yield as we did in Karnataka. This one we did the same thing, which shows about the worth of the water is about 7,211 million rupees per year. Okay. So we have looked at the water used for the drinking, agriculture, livestock, etc. And then for electricity generation. So we have looked at this one, and then accordingly we have assigned the values for this one electricity as well as the water used for the drinking and irrigation, etc. Okay. So Then, as I said earlier, the non-timber forest produce, you have two scenarios. The first scenario is based on the published literature in the neighborhood watershed, and the other one is based on the forest department records. The forest department record values are slightly higher compared to the data of the study done by the researchers. We have used the scenario one to quantify this one, which is about 42 million rupees per year, as against the 76 million rupees as per the forest department the data. Okay. Then we have done the fodder. We know the spatial extent of the grassland and also the accessibility. When we talk to the local people, they said that about 8 months in a year they go out and collect the grasses for or take the animal for grazing, etc. And based on the what is the cost of the fodder in the market and the cost of this one, we quantified what is the services provided by the forest in terms of the fodder, which is about 411 million rupees per year. Okay. Then we have the fish. Fishery department has the data, and also we got the data about the market price from the fishery department and the cost of that, which amounts to about 109 million rupees per year. So then fuel wood, again we had this one, what is the per capita the fuel wood consumption, and also we know that what is the kind of the fuel wood people extract from the forest. Based on that, and also the market value of the fuel wood and the cost of the fuel wood extraction, based on that we have quantified the worth of the fuel wood, the some goods, which is about the 181 million rupees per year. Okay. So then we have done the regulating services in terms of carbon sequestration, soil conservation, groundwater recharge, nutrient cycling, pollination, air purification. I repeat what I said earlier. For the first time in the country, the regulating services has been done using the primary data. All along, if you look at published literature, people have adapted the value based on the experiment done in some other countries, and they have taken the value to the Indian condition and they have done the quantification. And Jeevit Nadi, the foundation, the invitation made us to do this analysis because it's a smaller catchment. We took advantage of the small catchment to do the quantification. Now, probably this will become a model for other studies in the countries. When we did the carbon stock, this is the region where we have traveled, we have tracked, and we collected the biomass data, that is above ground biomass in terms of the girth and height of a tree, and we quantified what is the carbon that is stored in the forest and what is the worth of this one, which amounts to about 300 billion rupees. This is the stored carbon. It is like how much carbon that is stored is depending on the life of the forest. You can say this much carbon is stored in this one. That also gives the tons per hectare values also. Okay. Then per year, how much carbon gets added? We also based on the net primary productivity and also increase in the girth of the tree. One can assess that. We have done the quantification, which amounts to about 29 the billion rupees per year. Okay. So then soil conservation, as I explained earlier, we use the invest model and we looked at the sediment delivery ratio and considering the local rainfall, soil erodibility, land use, and topographic data, we have done the quantification of this one, okay, in the soil conservation, which is about 93 million rupees per year. Then groundwater recharge is about 1,495 billion rupees per year. Okay, so that shows that of course this is based on the data that what we got from the groundwater department, and there are various the observation wells there, and also in addition to that we got the data from the published literature also, which was used to do the quantification. You can see that the Central Groundwater Control Board, Pune, the data we have used for the quantification, which amounts to about 1,495 the the million rupees per year. Okay, so then nutrient cycling is about 100 million rupees is the worth of the nutrient cycling in the catchment. Then pollination amounts to 1,438 the million rupees per year in this catchment of about the 2039 square kilometers. Okay, then air purification amounts to about 177 the million rupees per year. Okay, so then habitat protection, as I explained earlier, based on the value for managing the national park or sanctuary, it amounts to about 364 million rupees per year. So now we have done the quantification of all the regulating services. Similarly, we did the cultural services based on the data available from the forest department on the research project that has been funded to do the research in the region. And also we compile the information related to the ecotourism online, the and other sources. So based on that, the ecosystem services in terms of cultural service amounts to about 50 million rupees. Now we have done the quantification of the ecosystem services in terms of provisioning, regulating, and cultural services. Now, when we aggregate that, we get the total ecosystem supply value per year. Then, using that total ecosystem supply value per year and considering the life of the asset as 50 years and the discount rate of 3%, we have computed net present value. Now, when we did that, you see that the total ecosystem supply value amounts to about 50 billion rupees per year. You know, so now NPV. So think this is okay. There is a slight problem here with this. Okay, now the region of influence also we have done the assessment. You know, this subcatchment. What is the worth of the subcatchment? So, which is about the the TSV is about the you can look at the number 18,114 million rupees per year, and NPV amounts to about 4,66,000 million rupees. Okay, so then TSV for that the the streams with 100-meter buffer we did the study because as per the norm 100-meter is a no the development zone as per the government of India norms. Okay, so which amounts to about 1,619 hectares, and TSV of that region amounts to about 398 million rupees, or the NPV of this is about 10,249 million rupees. Okay. Now, even then there is a small confluence region which I visited. There was a sacred grove and all those, the which good vegetation also. There are good trees in the region. When we did that Mula confluence, area is about 6.9 hectares. The total ecosystem supply value is 1.7 million rupees per year, or NPV is about 43 million rupees. Okay. So okay, this is that region which correspond to 6.9 hectares, and about the worth is about 1.7 million rupees per year. Okay, so now this is the team we did the work. You can see everyone actively involved in that. I mean, we are grateful to Madam Revati, then Kedar and Amit who actively come in the field, and of course Shubha was there when we visited the Ram this and that confluence region the first day. Then, of course, we had a discussion with Bhushan came to the field on the second day for the biomass estimation. Then, of course, Ketaki and others were in the meeting. We had a discussion. Of course, we also spent some time in Madam Ketaki's guest house. We had a good lunch in the guest house also. So now, whatever the work we have done for the Western Ghats, you can also see that we have taken it to the next level. We developed the Western Ghats Spatial Decision Support System. You can access this web page. We launched this on July 24 in a remote village in Shumaga district. Yeah, when I was invited to deliver the K.V. Subbanna Memorial Lecture. K.V. Subbanna is a well-known Kannada poet who passed away some time back. In his memory, I delivered the lecture. On that day, they launched this web page in that forum. My thinking was to see how effective is this kind of the thing, whether it would reach the Delhi. As I anticipated, there was a discussion in the parliament about this the facility, the decision support system, and how much it is being used by the government for the decision making. And also, a committee was sent to my lab to discuss with me about this. When I highlighted the carbon, etc., the chairman of the committee told me that this is one of the very interesting outcome of this work. I will take it to the government of Karnataka. He met the minister in charge of the environment and forest the next day. After the deliberation, when the minister was told about the ecosystem value and also just about the carbon sequestration, the minister said that he will agree to implement the Kasturi Rangan committee report. All along, people didn't want Madhav Gadgil committee report or Kasturi Rangan committee report because they were against, once these are ecologically sensitive regions are delineated, these mafias will not have the access to do the exploitation of the resources. They were worried about it, and there was a publicity wrong, the message in the system, unnecessary publicity had happened in the system. At that time, somebody had gone to the Supreme Court with a PIL asking the conservation of the ecologically fragile region. That time the Supreme Court asked all the state government to provide the list of the villages which are ecologically sensitive and what are the level of sensitiveness, whether they are ESR 1, 2, 3, or 4. None of the state government, including Maharashtra, didn't respond to the Supreme Court, the whatever the request. Then, since I work in NGT, one of the expert member of the National Green Tribunal asked me whether we can do something. Then I had mentioned to him, I will not only provide the details to the court, I will also make it available to the public. So that's where we launched this portal where people can access their village. They can choose their state, they can choose their district and taluk and then village and see the ecological sensitiveness. If you want water and food, you need to protect this ecologically sensitive region. That is what my first part of the talk. And to make it that happen, through the advocacy for decision making, we have developed this decision support system. Now I'm in the last part of my presentation, the society relevant science. We developed the low cost wastewater treatment based on the nature based solution. Then rainwater harvesting, then creating the water bodies, mini forest. We have created, demonstrated the utility of that. And whatever we have learned, we also disseminate to the wider section of the society through the environmental education program. My thinking is when people are environmentally literate, they'll become sensible. When they are sensible, they'll become responsible. And when they are responsible, they become an asset to the nation. That's what I want to give it to my nation. That's where we are working towards that. Okay. And today's talk is also in that direction to enhance the awareness among the citizens about the worth of the ecosystem. All of us have not understood the worth of a mother at home. If you have done the services provided by mother and valuation, then we wouldn't have the ill treated of the mother. That is where the worth of the ecosystem, once we know the worth of the ecosystem, then all of us will also learn how to protect the ecosystem. As I said earlier, the learning what we have to give it to our children is make them to respect the mother at home. When they respect mother at home, they will learn to respect mother earth. Now this gives the water body what we have created in the campus, which has become a lab for my students who work on biofuels. Not only students are happy with this thing, we also have otter in the campus. We don't know from where it has come, but we have the otter in the campus, which is a voracious eater of the fish. When we did the biodiversity assessment of this water body, we found there is enough algae, the zooplankton, and fish. That means nature knows how to maintain balance to sustain all the living organism when we facilitate. Our job is to create the water body, store 10 lakh liters of water. I stay on the campus. My family requires 500 liters a day. That means about 1 lakh and 1.5 lakh liters. And I'm putting back 10 times that. If every citizen does it, there won't be a poverty of water on the earth. Even if you look at our this saint from Mudabidre contacted me because Mudabidre faced a severe water crisis during 2014 and 15. My prescription to this saint was, if we can rejuvenate the lakes in his Moodbidre. I said there are 32 lakes are there. If we can do it, we have solved the water problem. Then he didn't have the resource to do it. When I requested him to do it for 2 lakes, he did 2 lakes. Then because Saint did it, remaining 30 lakes were done by his community in the entire taluk. Last year, that is after 4 years, when entire Karnataka faced a green drought, this particular taluk where this kind of decentralized management of water bodies happened with the shramadhan of local people by desilting, etc., you know, there was no water crisis in that thing. There was no drought in that region. And when you see and also the saint had 12 acres of land in his temple. So we created a water body. We gave a design where is the lowest point, what is the size of the water body. I gave the proposal to him in the first week of May. And I told him that if he does it in the June 5th when it rains, we'll have the water. As I had anticipated, he shared the photograph. You can see the water in the water body and also the saint doing the planting of native species and the thing. The success is because of the youth. Even the saint is young and youth from the Alva Science and Engineering College are actively involved in that. Even CEO of Alvas is also quite young. So when I saw the positive environment there, we made sure that this young CEO also create the water body which stores 25 lakh liters of the water, and also took up the native species planting in the catchment area. Next year, when I visited this region, you see that there's a greenery with abundant water, and of course, you can see the smile on our face. To put it on the other side of this one for to convey the message stronger, this gentleman who is the CEO of that Alvas was a bachelor trying to get married, but it was not happening. Unlike Bangaloreans who get married through the Facebook, all these faceless fellows, the next month they will be running to the court with a divorce paper. Unlike that, after creating this water body, he gets a wonderful partner who take care of the joint family. When I visit that institution, she doesn't want me to stay in the hotel or in their guest house. I have to stay in their house. Such a thing. This also illustrate when you have the integration of science, culture, society, spirituality, and the society, you will see the prosperity in the region. You can see the spirituality here. You can see the culture here, and also the science doing its job and society actively involved in that because of that we have the water in the system. So now when you come to my campus, you will see this climber. This I was fascinated by a climber when I was young. I brought the pod which had 14 seats to the campus. Out of 14, 7 I have kept in my lab here. Other 7 I planted in 7 locations in the campus. Out of the 7, in only one location, it has grown so big that is next to the building where I worked for the last 2 decades, which highlight that even the plants know who will take care. Then in front of this building, we in a 2 hectares area which was given by Professor Sienna Rao, we created a mini forest of 49 native species. 500 saplings were planted in the early 90s. Today you come to that region, you get a feel of the rainforest, and you will see the varieties of the wild animals like slender lories, the snakes, etc., birds, etc. And more importantly, the water, which was 150 feet earlier, today we have the water at 5 to 10 feet. Not only the water, even the temperature in this region is 2 degree lower. That highlights that vegetable forests of native species help in moderating the microclimate and also provide us the water. What I spoke earlier, I'm demonstrating with our own example from a campus. Okay, that is what we communicate to the wider section of the society. You can see the audience. What I get sometimes it runs into a few thousand. And also, this is the program in various schools in the college, probably in the entire country. My group is the only group which has given 2000 plus lectures in various schools and colleges. And in addition to that, we also offer a course on environmental management. For the last 23 years, we have done it. That's how we are doing the capacity building at various level, school level, the college level, and also the people working at industry and university, etc., hoping that the people become environmentally literate. We organize a symposium once in 2 years, popularly known as Lake Symposium. this event gets 1,000 to 1,200 people register for the event, international and national delegate. And most important thing is 30 to 35% of the school and college student. The children do a simple experiment like what we did in Mula Mutha Catchment, carbon assessment, other lake monitoring. They are trained by the student. Now you can see the Karthik here when he was doing his doctorate with me. He was doing some of the activity. Now today he is a faculty in Agarkar Research Institute at Pune. So now you can see the children go to the field, collect the sample, they do the analysis. Similarly, in the rural areas, children do take part in this program through the neighborhood mapping of biodiversity. you know our work also, we are successful in getting the Ramsar tag for a wetland in Karnataka. We didn't have any wetland. you know After I became member of the Karnataka Wetland Authority, because of our 25 years of science in this region, we could demonstrate the biodiversity and more importantly, ecosystem services are provided by this, and 7,000 family dependent on this ecosystem. The per hectare worth of the ecosystem is about the 1 million rupee per hectare per year. The Ramsar Secretariat and the Minister of Environment were convinced, and last year, 30th January, it was declared as a Ramsar wetland of international importance. This is a report that what we prepared, similar to what we prepared for Mula Mutha Catchment. We are successful in getting convincing the bureaucracy and the national level and as well as the international level. And these two are publication what we published in the Nature in the last year. One is on Bangalore and the other one is the work what we did in Goa. That this highlights the various aspects of the research we are carrying out in various parts of the country. If you want more details, you can write to me at this email ID. And these are the portal where you get the details. My research publications are available at this portal, and these are the environmental information system what I coordinate and as a part of the ministry's program is available here. So the website looks like this. You can see the decision support system is available here, and environmental information and the information about Lake Symposium and environmental management are available here. When you access, you will see that all my publications are there. In YouTube, you will get many of my talk, including 15-minute TED talk and various languages also. See, agenda of our science is to sow the seeds of knowledge in this young brain. They will become asset to the nation. That's what we want them to, and we want to give the asset who are responsible. So now when this youngster do a good job, naturally there is a smile on everybody's face. Thank you very much for listening to me. So I have done my job. I am sure that now you have understood what is the worth of the Mula Mutha Catchment and also the Western Ghats. And also in the meanwhile, you also know the worth of the mother at home or spouse at home. So that at least from today onwards, my only request is let us not disrespect women at home. Thank you very much.